Hello everyone, how's it going? And welcome to my Wild Rift tier list for patch 4.1b. In this video, I'm going to be talking to you all about my thoughts on Twitch. I've added some new roles to some of the champions, and we've got a lot of changes to some of the roles. But before we jump into the tier list, this is going to be my third giveaway of the month. I will be giving a random skin chest to one lucky winner in the comment section. So all you have to do is like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below, just with any comment at all. I'd love to know your thoughts on the Wild Rift meta at the moment. I do read every one of your comments, and I do try and reply to as much of them as possible. I do have two other videos this month that I will be giving away a random skin chest in them videos as well, and all the giveaway winners will be drawn on April 30th. So be on the lookout for that day, and make sure you keep your eyes on your notification, because I will be replying to the winners of everyone in them videos. Right, let's head into the tier list now for Wild Rift. There are some roles that hasn't really changed too much, but there are some roles that have changed quite a lot. First, let's talk about the Baron lane. Baron lane is one of the roles that hasn't really changed too much, to be honest with you. I think the meta is pretty much staying the exact same for a long time now in the Baron lane, and you can see it's kind of the same thing with the competitive meta as well. If I just go through all the champions, and I'll explain to you what my thoughts are of the champions. Wukong, very safe, very amazing Baron lane carry. Probably one of the best Baron lane champions to play as a starter. Got insane healing, got great team fight potential, really good 1v1 potential as well. And the great thing about Wukong is you can play really safe. You just play super safe in the Baron lane. You just heal up, and then you join team fights with your ultimates, because he has one of the best ultimates of anyone in the Baron lane, and it can really make a difference. You know, with the items being really strong at the moment, like Black Cleaver, Divine Sundra, he is absolutely great. Renekton is a really aggressive early game Baron laner that wants to go for aggressive early game items like Blades of Ruin King and Black Cleaver to try and get an advantage in laning phase. He can still scale pretty well when it comes to the mid and late game. Not really one of them split push champions like Wukong as well. More to do with the dueling early on, because of how much damage he does and how much single target damage he does with his second ability and his empowered abilities with his Fury stacks. But overall, he is still very strong. He can still tank at the front line, but again, he's going to be a little bit squishier than most of the Baron laners, because we're not going for Divine Sundra, we're going for the Black Cleaver and Blade of the Ruin King. Akali, really great late game scaling carry in the Baron lane, one of the best late game carries in the Baron lane right now. So annoying to deal with as well, because of her shroud. She can turn camouflage and turn invisible. She can move around team fights and just pretty much do whatever she wants. She can dive onto the back line with ease. She can one-shot carry. She can do pretty much everything. The only problem with Akali is that her early game is pretty weak against most of the other Baron laners, so you do have to play very passive in the laning phase. Just try and farm up as much as possible. Just try and stay passive. Don't fall too far behind, and as long as you don't fall too far behind, you can join team fights later on, jump on the backline carries, and deal a lot of damage and be a real nuisance to their backline carries. Jax, one of the best split pushers in the game right now, has a really strong 3-item power spike with Divine Sundra, Blade of Ruin King, and Hullbreaker. He pretty much just split pushes for days. He does an insane amount of damage to towers. He can still join team fights and still be very useful in team fights, but his power really relies on getting to that 3-item power spike and looking to go and split push into the side lane. Does an insane amount of damage, has really good carry potential as well, because he does a lot of great single target damage. And kind of same with the Fiora. Fiora's probably a better team fighter than Jax, I would say, in general, because Fiora has a lot more mobility and has a lot of ways to outplay. But again, Fiora's another champion that takes towers very quickly and is a great split push champion to play in the Baron lane. But Fiora's quite a difficult champion. I would say Jax is a lot more easier to play. Fiora's a little bit more difficult, but still a really good champion to play. Jace, really strong early game. He has 6 abilities to basically work around in the early game, because he already has his ultimate at level 1. So he has his melee form, he has his range form, he can poke very easily, he can go into melee range really easily. He's great at split pushing, he's great at team fighting, just all around a really great Baron laner. Aatrox did receive a little bit of a nerf in the most recent patch. If I remember correctly, it was a cooldown of his first ability. Didn't really do too much to him. He's still very strong. He still has a great amount of team fight potential. His team fighting is absolutely insane. His healing is his main asset though. His healing that he gets from his ultimate, from also his items as well, makes him so annoying to deal with. Even when you build anti-heal like Executioner's Calling or Oblivion Orb, the AP option, he's still really annoying to deal with, and he still does a ton of healing. Quite easy to play. He has some cool unique combos, but yeah, overall really cool champion to play. Garen, super easy champion to play, really tanky. Has basically no skill set at all, I would say. You just spin to win, you just do as much damage as possible, you just push the minion wave, and you just look to roam, press your ultimate button when someone drops low on health, and boom, you won the team fight. If there's any Baron laner that I'd recommend to start off playing if you haven't played the Baron lane before, then it is definitely Garen. Camille's still really strong. Obviously, after her rework, she got a few pretty nice buffs, and nothing has really changed since then. Camille, very strong. Has a lot of mobility with her third ability. Again, another champion that has a great split push potential and can escape really easily with her hook shot, but also she has a great ultimate that is really strong during team fights. You can isolate an enemy carry in the backline and allow the rest of your team to follow up and still deal a lot of damage to that carry in the later stages. So if you can use your ultimate, and if you can get a high damage carry in the backline, then she can be really strong. Gwen, a little bit weak during the early game, but kind of like a Carly in a way, that she has one of the best scalings of any Baron laner in the game right now. Really strong. Once she gets 3 or 4 items, she can be very OP. She has basically a second ability which doesn't allow any skill shots to be hit by her, and also auto attacks as well. So basically she can't be targeted at all, and she can keep auto attacking. She can keep healing as well from the Rift Maker. Nash's Tooth gives her more auto attack damage, and she's just really annoying to deal with, but she is amazingly strong. Like, she is really strong right now in the current meta. Moving on to the S tier. Some of these champions could move up a tier, but it is quite difficult at times to move them up a tier when you have so many strong champions in the S+ tier. Shen is still really strong. Obviously, he has great split push potential. You can basically be AFK during laning phase, and basically you split push the whole game and then use your ultimate to join a team fight. That is one of the strengths with Shen, is that you don't need to actually join the team fight. You can instead try and create pressure on another side of the map, or create pressure by pushing mid lane or pushing another wave, and then use your ultimate to join the team fight and give one of your carries, or give someone that's low on health, a really big massive shield, so then they can dash forward, and then you can follow up with your taunt on all of your damage. Gragas in the Baron lane, probably not his best role, I would say. I think he's a lot strong in other roles like jungle and mid lane, but he is still very strong. You could play a tank Gragas build in the top lane, or you could play full AP Gragas. Tank Gragas, I would say, is better in the Baron lane because you have a lot more dueling potential. You can trade a lot easier. You're not going to be very squishy and have the potential to be one shot. Items like Rod of Ages, Iceborne Gauntlet, Twin Guard can be really good for Baron lane Gragas. Darius has fallen off quite a bit, obviously, for quite some time now. He just doesn't do well in terms of dueling, and he doesn't have a lot of mobility compared to these other carries, other Baron lane carries. Most of the time with Darius, you have to go for Proto Belt, or you're never going to get into melee range. You get kited so easily by any support or any AD carry, because it's really difficult for him to actually get into hook range, because so many carries have so long attack range. They have slows as well, so it's really difficult for Darius to actually make an impact. But he is still very strong though. He's in the S tier for a reason. His team fights is still great, and if you can get a reset on your ultimate, all you need is one reset on your ultimate, and then you will start to deal a lot of damage, and that's all you really need to do. Irelia, still really strong. Very high skill cap though, very difficult to play, but she is still very strong. Can split push, can also join team fights, and if you can land your stun and get the resets of your first ability off in a team fight, then you could do a lot of damage. Set, another champion that is fairly good in split pushing, but really good during team fights. If you could ultimate one of these tank Baron laners into like the whole of the enemy team, and then use your third ability to like stun them all, it's absolutely great. The more damage your ultimate does is based on how much HP the enemy champion has that you're using your ultimate on. So most of the time you don't even want to use your ultimate on the backline carries. You want to use your ultimate on the front line, and then that will give you access to the backline to then use your third ability, land a stun, and then start dealing damage to them. So it's still really strong. Malphite, super easy to play, really great tank. Again, another champion with Garen I would recommend to play. Malphite is less of a carry than Garen, I would say. You still can carry pretty well because of his unstoppable force. His team fight's really strong, but he just struggles a bit in the current meta at times against some of these other Baron laners. That's why he's not in S+ tier, but still really good. Still has a lot of team fight potential, is still great. Riven is a champion that could move up into S+ tier. She's very strong, has a lot of mobility, has great team fight potential, and yeah, is just really strong overall. Sion, a really, really nice tank in the Baron lane. He just gets a lot of HP in general, to be fair, because of his passive. He works really well with Mantle of the 12th Hour as well. He's just a very strong Baron laner in general, has a lot of trading potential, can look to split push because he can easily just split push with Hullbreaker and also demolish, but he can also join team fights with his ultimate very easily. You could just like use your ultimate down the river and try and join a team fight. So he's kind of like Shen in a way, but Shen has easy access into team fight, where Sion needs to kind of wait a little bit and charge up as he runs down the lane. Urgot's still pretty decent. I still think Urgot is in a pretty decent spot, especially with Sterix Gage now working on ranged champions. I think he's quite strong. His early game is definitely a lot stronger. He doesn't scale as well into the middle late game, even though Twin God does allow him to easily scale up a little bit better because you can tank a lot of damage and you can be a real nuisance in the front line. But the thing is that most of the time you want to try and get an early advantage with Urgot, with like Kraken Slayer, because you have so much early game trading power because of your second ability dealing so much damage. Dr. Mundo, he did receive some changes in the most recent patch. He is in a pretty decent spot right now. The only thing is that Dr. Mundo doesn't really do well against AD damage, because the AD damage is normally quite consistent. He does really well against AP champions because he likes to build items like Spirit Visage to get more healing, but also because just in general with healing champions in general is a lot easier to play versus AP champions because they have a lot more burst damage, whereas like an AD champions normally have a lot more consistent damage. You know, you talk about AD carries in general, you talk about any sort of bruises, they have a lot of consistent damage, but like a lot of AP champions, like you can say like Carly and Gwen is kind of as an example, or Gragas, they have a lot of burst damage. They use their abilities and they do a lot of burst damage, whereas if you take damage from auto attacks, it's a lot harder, but he is still very, very strong. A tier, most of these champions like okay, you can play them in the Baron lane, but they're not the best. You know, Pantheon can still do pretty well. His ultimate's pretty cool to be able to pretty much join a team fight wherever you want to. His laning phase, his training potential is quite nice, but other than that, he's not really too great. Singed can do quite well. He can do okay, but to be honest, he's kind of meh at times. Like he's not really okay. Yone, I could probably move up into S tier. I think Yone Baron lane is actually not that bad to warrant him going into A tier. I'll probably move him up into S tier, to be honest. He does do okay in the Baron lane. I think he's a lot better jungler or mid laner, to be honest with you, because Yone's early game is not the best and he might lose in terms of trades against any of these other Baron lane champions, but he can still carry and he does have a lot of outplay potential. Kennen's still pretty cool. Does have a really huge teamfight ultimate that is really, really strong. Can decently trade during laning phase. It's okay, it's not that bad. Gragas is okay, again, not too bad. You don't really benefit a lot from Hullbreaker anymore because ranged champions kind of got like a little bit of a nerf. Olaf is okay as well. Doesn't really have a lot of trading power. Can be okay during team fights, but yeah, he just loses trades most of the time against all the champions above. B tier, some of these B tier champions did get changed. I haven't tested Nasus yet in the Baron lane. I'm very curious if anyone in the comments or anyone watching this video has tested Nasus to see if his buffs are actually decent or to see if they're actually worth it. But I'm not too sure if they're actually worth it or not to move him up or down or keep him the same. I think he's still like in the same spot where he just takes way too long to scale, and even at 2 or 3 items when he fully stacked, he can get kited really easily because he doesn't have a lot of mobility and he just doesn't really do that much damage. Tryndamere as well also got a buff. He got a buff more for his laning phase, which from his first ability. So his first ability healing is actually not that bad. It means that he can trade a lot easier now, and then when he drops low on health, he can use his first ability to heal himself back up, which is kind of nice. But other than that, I mean, he doesn't really offer too much in a Baron lane. Teemo can work, it's okay. You can bully out some of these melee champions with Teemo, but then you just get dove on once, or you just get outplayed once, and then Teemo just becomes useless. And Kayle is obviously in C tier because Kayle is still Kayle, and Kayle doesn't really offer too much. She's not really that great of a champion. But if she gets to level 16, if you get into late game, if you get full items, probably one of the best champions in the game. Well, I mean, not in the game, but probably one of the best champions. But it's just getting to that point, which is the difficult part. Moving on to jungle. There's been quite a few changes in the jungle. Looking at my list now, I do like a little list of like things that have changed that I want to focus on talking about. One of the things that I did change in the S+ tier is I did move Evelynn up. The thing is with Evelynn, Evelyn's a bit of a weird champion because if you understand how to play Evelynn, and if you're in the lower elos, then Evelynn can carry every single game. The higher you go up in terms of ranks, the more difficult it becomes to play Evelynn, because players start to understand how to play around Evelynn. Players start to buy control walls and start to, you know, put in deep vision to try and keep track of where Evelynn is. You don't get, you know, traded as much. You don't get outplayed as much because they understand the way that Evelynn works with her taunt on her second ability. So there is ways that the higher elo you go, the more difficult it does play to get, difficult to get Evelynn. But I moved her up into S+ tier just because of how much carry potential she has. She's really insane. Her burst damage is insane. Like I said, most of the time in low elo, they don't really understand the whole invisibility thing. So it's really, really strong to just move around the map invisible, gank any lane you want to, power farm through the jungle, and then one-shot carries in a late game. So she has a lot of carry potential. And she is still very, very strong. Wukong is still very strong, like I said, in the Baron lane. Wukong is maybe stronger in the Baron lane than jungle, in my opinion, because they nerfed Wukong jungle quite a lot, and you don't get as much healing, you don't get as much attack speed anymore, so your jungle clear speed is not the best. But again, it's one of them safe junglers that you can play. That's really, really easy to play and really easy to just farm through the jungle. Aatrox is just as strong in the Baron lane as he is in the jungle. Both these roles for Aatrox are very, very strong. Aatrox jungle just allows him to farm up a little bit in the early game and get to level 5. Not that Aatrox's early game and laning phase is weak at all. It's just getting to that level 5 point in the jungle and just clear through the jungle. It's just very, very easy for Aatrox, and getting to that point and getting 1 or 2 items can make Aatrox very, very strong. Lee Sin got a pretty big buff in the most recent patch. His base AD got increased in the early game, so this gives him more damage with his abilities and also his auto attacks. So it means his early jungle clear speed is going to be quicker. Lee Sin for me was already very, very strong. He has a lot of outplay potential. He's really awesome to play. It can be difficult at times to understand his abilities and try and get the right kicks, but again, kind of like Evelynn in a way, if you understand how to play him, if you understand his early game dueling power and early game damage potential, he can be insanely strong. Kha'Zix, really good isolated, really good damage when you get a champion isolated. It's probably one of the fastest jungle clears in the game because of his empowered first ability. Insanely strong. You got your first ability, you got your empowered second ability as well, which allows you to poke at range, and then you have your resets with your empowered third ability that allows you to jump around, reset, deal a lot of damage, and do insanely well. So Kha'Zix, really, really good carry jungler. Another really good carry jungler is Olaf as well. Olaf's really good. It kind of makes sure that the early game of Olaf is not really warranted at all, because you're just farming through the jungle anyway. So it means that you can get to level 5, you can get a few items, and then when you get a few items and you get level 5, you can just run in with the ultimate, you can ignore all the crowd control, and you can just keep dealing damage over and over again. So it's insanely strong how well Olaf can play. Dinah's still pretty good as well. Insane amount of burst damage with electrocute. You got great team fight potential, great jungle clear speed, and it's just really good in general. Gragas, again, same as Dinah. I think Gragas has more outplay potential though with his ultimate, but again, you have really insane one-shot potential with electrocute, great team fight as well. The only thing I'd be worried about with Dinah and Gragas is they are very, very squishy, so you can get one-shot yourself. But they are still both very strong. Most of the time you can one-shot them before they one-shot you in a way. So it's really, really cool to play these two champions, and they're both great carries as well. They're both amazing champions. Moving on into S tier, Irelia is still pretty good. Again, same as what I said with Baron lane, she is quite difficult to play, but she can still carry and she can still be very, very good. Vi and Xin Zhao both got buffs this patch. Vi got a really, really good buff with the buff to her first ability, so she can use it more often, so she can be more mobile, she can gank more often, or she can use it to escape easier as well. I think the cooldown of her first ability is very, very risky, because I think Vi is already a pretty decent champion, because you have great single target damage, you have great single target lockdown with your ultimate. You can farm quite easily. You get really, really tanky as well if you go for items like Steros Gauge, Trinity Force, Warmogs into Twin Guard. I think that's a really, really strong build right now for Vi. And kind of same with Xin Zhao in a way. Xin Zhao got his base AD increase, and also something else got buffed with Xin Zhao, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But he got some really, really nice buffs as well. He's a really, really strong champion at the moment. in the current meta. He does a lot of damage. He has a great ultimate as well, which can block a lot of range damage. I think a lot of people underestimate how strong Xin Zhao's ultimate is. He has a lot of great damage. He can negate a lot of great damage at range because of his ultimate. He has a great engage tool as well with his second ability and his third ability, allowing him to basically dash onto a champion at long range. So he has a lot of potential, and he's really, really great champion to play. Quite easy to play as well. Obviously, Morgana is still pretty decent. You can still clear through the jungle pretty easily. You can't double jungle camp anymore, unfortunately. So it means that Morgana is not S+ tier because she can't clear through the jungle as fast as what she did before. But she's still really good. She still can farm quite easily. She can still scale quite well into the mid and late game. And her ultimate is still great during team fights. You can get one, if you land one binding, or if you get a few slows off with your second ability, with your ultimate, she can be very, very good. Riven, same with Baron lane, a lot of mobility. I think the mobility works a lot better in the jungle than in the Baron lane because it allows you to get around the map a lot easier, allows you to go and make plays and try and make ganks and try and duel against the enemy champion, enemy jungler. But overall, Riven, with her mobility and with how strong she is in terms of dueling, very, very strong jungler. Does clear the jungle quite quickly as well at the same time. Echo's fairly decent. Again, because Echo has a pretty weak early game, jungle allows him to just farm up in the early game, get to level 5. And the great thing is that Echo's really good at tower dives and really good at ganking from a very very deep into an enemy territory, because he can just use his ultimate, heal up, and then escape away to safety very, very easily. So if you're playing Echo, be on the lookout to try and look for tower dives, because you can use your second ability under tower, dash in, get the shield, take a few tower shots, and then use your ultimate to toggle the tower aggro and then escape really, really easily. So a great champion which has a lot of great potential. Fiora kind of the same with Riven, where you have a lot of dueling potential. Ganking potential for Fiora is not too great, but I think when it comes to team fights, Fiora can be very, very strong. And that's pretty much it with Fiora, to be honest. There's not really much else to say with Fiora. Her jungle clear speed's okay. Again, it's all about just farming up with Fiora, getting a few items, and then scaling with her. Shyvana's pretty decent. I don't think she's as strong as what she has been before. Because you can't just AFK farm the jungle anymore because you're not going to get as much gold, and her ganking potential is not really too great. But if she does scale, she gets a few dragons, she gets a few barons, she stacks up her passive. She's such a beast in the late game. Jarvan's still pretty good as well. Jarvan is really good. Full lethality Jarvan is now a thing apparently. I've seen Vex do it in competitive where he goes like Ghost Blade, Dusk Blade, Lord Dominic's Regards, Infinity Edge, or something like that, like just full one-shot Jarvan, which very much surprises me. But yeah, if you want to try that, you could try that if you want to, but I don't know, it's one of them ones. It's like, if you're building Jarvan lethality, it's like, can I one-shot the carries before they one-shot me? Because you get very, very squishy. But you can try that out if you want to. But yeah, again, another great jungler. Really good ganking potential as well. Really good lockdown with his ultimate. So yeah, just great champion. Yone really good because of his scaling. Again, him playing in the jungle means that he doesn't really have to suffer during the early game. And Yone's ganking is actually surprisingly very, very good because you can use your third ability at range. You could just deal a lot of damage. Yes, he doesn't have a lot of crowd control unless he stacks up his first ability. But the great thing is that you can use your third ability and you can basically gank a lane. And then when you're done ganking a lane, you just use your third ability again. You go right back to your ghost or right back to your shadow, whatever he calls it. So you go right back and you're like, okay, cool. Back to farming I go. So I think he's pretty good. And his late game is absolutely insane. You know, just 2 crit items, a few more damage items. He's absolutely insane. Hold on 2 seconds. Ross Kane is insanely strong right now. Because of the way the meta is, with it being a very tanker bruiser meta, Kane being able to deal extra % damage based on the enemy's maximum health is very, very strong. His crowd control is really good. His healing is also very, very strong. So definitely recommend to play Ross Kane whenever you have the opportunity. But just make sure that you play against melee champions so you can stack up your red form more than your blue form. Nunu's still really, really good. Has a lot of ganking potential. Is a great zoning tool during team fights as well because of his ultimate. You're able to use your ultimate. You're able to zone the enemy champions away from your carries. And then you can just tank a lot of damage. You can use your first ability to heal up a lot. Overall, pretty decent champion. Fizz, great carry, great one-shot potential. Again, ganking is not too great, but if you land your fish, then you can follow that up with your other abilities because its combos are very, very strong. Shen, I honestly could move Shen into S plus tier, be honest with you. Shen is absolutely insane in the jungle. Kind of explained it a little bit in Baron lane already. But basically with Shen, you just AFK farm the jungle the whole time. And yes, I said with Shyvana that it's not really good to AFK farm through the jungle, but the thing is with Shen is he doesn't really need to gank. He just needs to counter gank. You just use your ultimate whenever one of your enemies are whenever one of your teammates, sorry, are under threat, or whenever they're going for an engage, or you can ping them or anything, and then you use your ultimate and then you're there. You could be on the opposite side of the map and you just use your ultimate and you're there. His jungle clear speed is also extremely ridiculous, even after the recent nerfs that happened to him. Just insane champion. Lilia's pretty decent. There are a few champions here that I was thinking to move down to into A. Lilia was one of them. Echo and Fizz were also two of them, but I thought Echo and Fizz has just a lot of carry potential. Lilia's an interesting one. I think Lilia is like okay. I haven't seen Lilia in ranked for a very, very long time, so I'm not really too sure how she does in the current meta. But she is still a pretty good champion. You know, I think because she builds items like Leandries that does % health damage, that helps and benefits her a lot. She has a lot of movement speed. She has a lot of ways to clear through the jungle. Her team fight is also very good as well. If you can get like a flash Q into ulti, it can be very, very strong. Yeah, there are definitely some weaknesses to Lilia. Things like not being able to do a lot of burst damage, or things like, you know, not being able to easily get access to the back line or try and, you know, carry the games, or, you know, crowd control is there, but you have to use your flash and your Zhonya's to get the crowd control going, if that makes sense. So you have to use a lot of tools to actually get the same benefit that some of the other junglers just needs one button for, in a way. Nautilus, AP carry jungler, very, very strong. Insane burst damage, very good carry potential, clears through the jungle very quickly as well because of his third ability. Has a bit of tankiness as well with his second ability, but the main thing is you just walk up to a lane, you use your ultimate, you do half their HP with one ultimate, and you can burst them down with your CC combo, with your hook, and with your auto attack. Jace, I've added Jace back into the jungle. The reason being is that I saw it a lot in competitive, and the reason why I moved Jace jungle is that he wasn't really that strong for a while. It kind of fell out of the meta for a little bit. But I think removing Jace jungle was pretty much a bad idea in the first place. I still think Jace jungle can work, and I still think it is very, very strong. So I added him back in, and he is still there. So he's a champion that clears through the jungle very quickly because he has 6 abilities available to him, and he's able to just easily go through the jungle, clear through the jungle, and then gank any lane as well. He has a lot of poke, a lot of melee damage as well with melee form, which is really good. And Gwen, I've moved back up into S tier. Gwen is a jungler that has been nerfed quite a lot. There has been times where Gwen jungle has been very, very weak because of she can't really get as many stacks in the jungle. She can't get a lot of healing through the jungle, and the jungle clear speed is not as good as what it was before. But the great thing about Gwen is kind of what I said before about some other champions, is that playing Gwen jungle just allows you to basically just ignore the early game. You could just AFK farm the jungle in the early game, get to one item, and that's really where Gwen can shine. Join in team fights, try and gank with your ultimate, and overall she is still a very, very strong champion in general. So that's why I moved her up into S tier. Scrolling on down a little bit to some of the lower tiers. Again, some of these champions are like okay, some of them are not too bad. Some of them are very niche as well, like Urgot, for example. Urgot is a very niche jungler. I don't think he's actually that strong in the jungle, to be fair. I just don't really see the potential of Urgot. I think me putting him S tier before was like kind of like a hype moment, but yeah, I don't think he's actually that good. I mean, his jungle clear speed's pretty good, but I'm just trying to think to myself how that really works in terms of joining team fights or anything like that as well. There are quite a few tank junglers that are also very strong. You know, even though they're in A tier, they can still be very, very strong. Champions like Rammus, for example, I think the Rammus buff was actually really, really good. I played Rammus a little bit as well. Actually, I could move Rammus into S tier, to be fair. I think the buff to Rammus with him not getting reduced movement speed now on his second ability is actually insanely good. His build is also just to do with just getting a lot of tankiness, and it's just very, very strong overall. I think the only thing with Rammus is that he can get kited very easily. He can get CC'd very easily. Yes, he doesn't take that much damage, but it just depends if you can find the right opportunity with your ultimate and being able to try and get the taunt on a high value target in a way. Pantheon is okay, has pretty decent burst damage. Can farm through the jungle fairly well. Great thing is about Pantheon is his ultimate. He can just ultimate into any lane, especially if they're pushed on the tower. You can just walk up to a lane and then just ultimate in behind them. So it can be very, very good. Mundo's okay. Jungle clear speed pretty decent. Single target jungle clear speed is also pretty decent as well because of his cleaver, his first ability. He can farm pretty well. He tanks the jungle pretty well. He's decent. He's okay. Same with Mumu, pretty decent. Not too bad. Could be worse. I think the champions like the tank junglers like Ramos is probably better. Maybe Dr. Mundo's better. But Amumu still has a lot of carry potential. I still see people going full AP Amumu. If you want to go for that, you can do. Yeah, it's up to you. Graves is okay. I've been playing a lot of Graves recently because of my A to Z guide. I think he's decent. I don't think he deserves to be an S tier, but I think he's the decent jungler. He farms the jungle pretty well. His dueling potential is pretty decent. He's just more of a carry that can get one shot very easily, so it is a little bit difficult to play him at times, but he's still decent. Darius with phase rush, most of the time is what you do is when you play him in the jungle, you play phase rush. Again, the only thing about Darius in the jungle is kind of the same as what I said with Baron lane, is that when you're looking for ganks, you kind of need Protobelt early on, which means you have to invest a lot of gold into early boots and early Protobelt. And when other champions are getting items already at that point of the game, then Darius kind of falls behind the tempo a little bit. But if you can use your Pro Belt to your advantage, if you're good at Darius, then Darius jungle can be very, very good. Rengar's pretty decent. Can have a lot of great one-shot potential. He has his ultimate that he can turn invisible and try and jump onto someone. His tower taking actually is also pretty good. So you can try and use your empowered first ability and try and take the first tower of the game with Rengar, because his tower taking potential is insane. He has so much attack speed and so much damage. Zed's decent. His burst damage is pretty good. He has a lot of great sustained damage as well, with jumping in with his ultimate and then jumping back out using his second ability and going for some like crazy insane combos. So I think he's actually pretty decent. I think he's okay. Camille just doesn't farm through the jungle as quick as what she did before. She does have still a great lot of ganks. She is still very, very strong in terms of team fights, but I just think her jungle clear speed kind of puts her behind the tempo a little bit. Pike jungle is also still okay. You can still clear through the jungle quite quickly. Again, I think it's like one of these niche picks. I think some of these picks are very niche, like Urgot, Pike, like Darius, for example. So even though, like, because these are very niche picks in the jungle, I just don't think they're that strong. But they can carry and they can still be very strong. Shadow Cane still absolutely sucks. Actually, no, I can't say absolutely sucks, because I've seen some Shadow Canes carry, but I still don't think he's that good. Jack's jungle just isn't really a thing anymore, and it just isn't really that good. You just can't farm through the jungle as quick as what you used to, and yeah, it's just not that good. Warwick's kind of meh as well. I don't really like Warwick at all. I think Warwick is not really a champion that you can really play and can get kited really easily. And then you have Trendemir and Master Yi in C tier. Again, same sort of thing. Obviously, Trendemir got the little bit of the buff, but it doesn't really help him in the jungle at all. And then Master Yi is just Master Yi. Doesn't really do too much. Onto the mid lane we go. Again, mid lane is a role that hasn't really changed at all. There's not really any changes at all to the mid lane. They're all still pretty much exactly the same. I'll still go through the champions anyway. Ari, super easy to play. Has great one-shot potential with her charm. Has great carry potential as well. And has a lot of mobility and safe ways out with her ultimate. So you can use your ultimate to go in to try and charm, or you can try and use your ultimate just to just escape. She isn't like the best mid laner at the moment. There are a lot of champions that are better mid laners, but it's just how easy Ari is to play. That's why I put her into S+ tier. She's super easy to play. She does have a lot of great catch potential, which can be good in solo queue with her charm. And yeah, it's pretty decent. Lucian's still really, really good in the mid lane. You've got a very amount of different builds in the mid lane for Lucian. And because of how strong his laning phase is, that's really where Lucian does shine. You use your Kraken Slayer in the early game. You abuse all these melee champions in the mid lane early on. You deal a lot of damage. You get the lane pressure. And then you use that lane pressure and you use that lane priority to try and roam around, help your jungler, and help other lanes. But yeah, really, really strong mid laner. He doesn't scale as much as some of these other mid laners, but he's just this early game, which is really, really where his strength lies. Dan is still pretty decent. Does struggle a little bit in the early game. I mean, she's still decent. She still gets played a little bit. I don't know. Diana's a weird one. Maybe Diana could be like S tier or something. Maybe Diana's not like insanely strong. But I think there's potential for Diana because of how strong she just is during team fights. But I think Diana jungle is probably better than Diana mids. So I could move Diana down to S tier, to be fair, because I just don't think her mid lane, she just struggles a lot with trading in the mid lane. She can try and one shot, but then there's just so much mobility in the mid lane that it's very, very difficult to try and one-shot someone. Yone, insanely strong mid laner. Has a lot of trading potential with his shielding and also his abilities. He has a great one-item power spike with Blades of the Ruin King, because the more attack speed he gets, the lower the cooldown of your first ability gets, and then you can just build crit. You can build a lot of trading items like Divine Sunderer, and he just becomes insanely annoying to deal with. He can roam around the map, and he's just really, really strong. Kassadin, really weak during the early game, but can farm very, very easily at range with his second ability. You just use Fleet Footwork, you just farm in the early game against most of these ranged champions, and you just stay under tower. Honestly, the worst case scenario, you just stay under tower and you just farm whenever the minions come towards you, because that's all you need with Kassadin. All you need with Kassadin is 2 or 3 items, and then you use your ultimate, you dash around team fights, and you are such a pain to deal with. Karma's really, really good. Great supportive mid laner, has wave clear, has crowd control, has pretty much everything, has damage. I mean, just an all-round great mid laner. Again, very, very easy to play. Carly, same with Baron lane, can be very weak in the early game against some of these champions. But again, because some of these champions are also fairly weak in the early game, Akali can have a pretty okay time in the early game and scale pretty decently into mid lane game. Probably a lot easier in the mid lane than what she can do in the Baron lane against some of the bruisers. Yeah, you normally go Fleet Footwork in the mid lane because you're just going to get poked quite a lot and it's a very short lane. But yeah, Akali's still good, still scales really, really well into late game. Vex is pretty cool. Her ultimate is very, very cool, especially if you can get resets. You can use your ultimate and your fear to fear multiple enemy champions at once and burst them as well with Electrocute, which can be very, very strong. Zoe, even after her nerfs, is still insanely strong. I don't know, this champion is just so... I knew as soon as Zoe was going to get added to the game, I can't remember how long ago it was, long ago it was now, like a month ago or something like that. I don't know when it was. There was a time where Zoe got like introduced and got announced. I was like, this champion is going to ruin the game. And lo and behold, it's happening. It's happening in competitive at the moment. It's happening in solo queue. The champion's just absolutely disgusting. Like, she has everything. She has crowd control with her third ability that can easily sleep one target. Her one-shot potential is still insane, even with her first ability nerfs, and even with her third ability nerfs. She can escape really easily. She can pick up summoner spells from the freaking floor and just flash like 5 times during a team fight. Use Ignite, use Redemption, use Protobell, use everything. Just use everything. Just dash in with your real flash, dash away with the enemy's flash because they're going to flash away. The champion is just busted. I mean, I don't know. There's not really much more to say. Corki's still really, really good in the mid lane. If you go for items like Trinity Force, he has a lot of trading potential. He also has the same sort of strength that Lucian has, where he's a ranged champion. And he's an ADC, so his early game is actually pretty good. But he's a Lucian, sorry, not Lucian. Corki is a champion that can scale really well, though, because you normally go items like Malamune, Trinity Force, Riftmaker. So even his late game is really, really good. And his package is also very strong as well during team fights. I rally mid, same with mid lane, Baron lane and jungle, sorry. She does have a lot of carry potential, but she's just very difficult to play. That's why I don't put her in the S+ tier, but she is still a great champion. Katarina, I think, is an interesting one. I think a lot of people would put Katarina in S+ tier. For me, I think she is quite difficult to play, and you have to be very, very careful with Katarina because timing your abilities and timing your ultimate is the most important thing. And also, because there's so much crowd control in the game right now, I think at times it's very, very difficult to pick up Katarina. But overall, she's still a great carry. She still does quite a lot, and she still does an insane amount of damage. Zed mid lane, still also very, very strong. You do a lot of damage. You do insane work. There's just a lot that you can do with Zed, and he's just an insane champion overall. I could probably change Electrocute to Conqueror, but yeah, that's probably for another day. There are some like mages in mid lane as well, like Ziggs and Orianna, that are still really strong. You can just farm at range. You can just wave clear mid lane, and you can just scale and get 2 or 3 items, and then you're really, really strong. I'd put like Orianna and Ziggs in kind of the same category in a way, where they're just farming at range, and then you have insane burst damage and insane consistent damage in the late game just by spamming out your abilities. Galio mid lane is still pretty good. You have a lot of burst potential. You can roam around the map with your ultimate. You have great crowd control. You pretty much have everything as a mid laner for Galio. You're just very, very squishy if you go for mid lane Galio. Like very, very squishy. TF's still pretty good. His ultimate can definitely carry fights. Just don't go ADTF. I had an ADTF yesterday, go like 1 in 10. Don't go Blader and King, Witsend, Rapid Fire Cannon TF. The build just sucks. Like ADTF is so bad. always go for APTF. You have so much more carry potential. You have insane one-shot potential as well with APTF. Just don't go ADTF. Yasuo, very, very difficult to play. A lot more difficult than Yone, I would say, in a way. Again, some people would say that Yasuo is S+ tier worthy. Again, the only reason I put him in S tier is because he's very difficult and he's not really a champion for everyone. You know, it kind of depends on what you are as a player. Gragas, really good in mid lane, great one-shot potential. You can make a lot of outplays with your ultimate as well. Roam around, try and land your body slam flash. Really, really good champion. Jace, the same as Baron lane and jungle. He has 6 abilities to his disposal. Really strong carry in the mid lane. Has, you know, can farm at range. You can go into melee range. You just have so much damage. And Fizz is pretty good as well. His early game is pretty weak, Fizz, but if you can farm up a little bit, and then once you reach level 5, you have a lot of kill pressure with your ultimate Charm the Waters. A tier, Aurelion Sol is decent. I don't think he's that good. He's like okay. I mean, you can try and roam around with your third ability. You have a little bit of burst potential as well with your stars and also your first ability trying to CC someone, but he's not really too great. Singed is okay as well. Again, another champion that looks to try and roam around the map and just farm as much as possible in mid lane, but is okay. Kenna has decent teamfight potential, but kind of struggles against all the champions above. Echo's pretty decent in mid lane, but I'd much prefer to play him in jungle because his early game is fairly weak. Akshan, I think in general, is a very good champion. And I've seen a lot of Akshan players carry, but the reason why these Akshan players carry is because most of the time they're one tricks. There's a lot of high elo one-trick Akshan players that are absolutely insane at the game. But as a general player and as a general tier list, I don't think he's as strong as other mid laners. I think there's a lot of outplay potential for some of the other mid laners. Pyke is still decent in mid lane, even though they did nerf the damage to minions in the mid lane. I still think Pyke is okay. Just because of how much roaming potential he has. He can still clear the mid lane very, very quickly, and he's still like in a decent spot. Veigar's decent. You have one-shot potential. You have your cage, which is very, very strong, but that's pretty much it. B-tier champions, they're all like okay. They all have their own like niche thing. Like Annie can try and one-shot with her Tibbers, and she has a lot of burst damage, but after she uses her abilities, she's basically completely useless. She just walks around like a headless chicken. Morgana's like okay in mid lane. I don't know. Morgana's a weird one. Brand, apparently I'm underrating Brand. Like a lot of people are rating Brand quite highly at the moment. I just don't see the potential in Brand at all. I don't think he's really that good. And he just can get CC'd and isolated really easily. He could just get jumped on by assassins. There's nothing you can really do. If you're against any engaged champions that could jump on top of you, you're just stuck basically. Lux and Seraphine are pretty decent. They're like supportive mid laners. They're okay. They have decent wave clear. They have decent one-shot potential. Seraphine has her ultimate as well, but that's pretty much it. And Kayle is Kayle. Not much to say about Kayle, really. You just get beat at every stage of the game, unless you're level 16. Basically it. Right, on to AD carries. Do I start by talking about Twitch? Or do I work my way down? Let's start by talking about Twitch. Twitch. I played a few games of Twitch. His early game is probably one of the weakest early games of any AD carry, I would say. I can't think at the moment any AD carry that has a weaker early game than Twitch, except if you go for like, actually no, to be honest, I'd much rather have a Senna early game and an AD carry spot than Twitch. The thing is with Twitch is that he's a very different playstyle to other AD carries in the bot lane. He's more of an assassin. You pair Twitch with like, not pair, sorry, you relate Twitch to like an Evelynn. You know how Evelynn likes to turn invisible? She likes to surprise an enemy champion, and then boom, she pops out of nowhere. She does a lot of burst damage. Twitch is kind of like that. Twitch, you need to use your ambush, your first ability, and your camouflage to your advantage. You want to use your first ability, go camouflage, and then go sneak around, try and find an enemy that's isolated, and then boom, pop out nowhere, use your ultimate, use your venom damage, use your poison damage, and do a lot of burst damage. The thing is, though, is that Twitch doesn't really do a lot of damage in general anyway. I mean, he does like okay damage once you get like 4 items. You need like 4 items for Twitch to do damage. You need Stormrazor, Infinity Edge, Hurricane, and probably Lord Domix regardless. I mean, I don't know. You can maybe fit a Blade Rune King in there if you want to as well earlier, but I don't know. Like, Twitch is a weird one. Like, Twitch is really, really weird. It's like, I've seen games where Twitch has potential and can carry, but then he is so squishy. Like, he could get one shot by a Galio Q. Honestly, like, that's how low HP Twitch does. But again, like I said, He's a very different playstyle to any AD carry, and I think it will take a lot of time for players to adapt to Twitch and how to play Twitch, because again, it's all about just using your first ability during the laning phase, trying to trade with a little bit of extra attack speed and just taking really short trades. You just use your first ability, you go into the lane, you then auto attack a few times, use your poison, and then you back off. Like, you're taking little trades like that. That's the only little trade you're taking. And then in the late game, again, you're using your first ability, using your camouflage, and then you're using your insane range and attack damage with your ultimate, and then you're trying to do this insane team-wide damage with your ulti. But again, I just don't think Twitch is that great. I think he's like okay. I don't know, he's weird. I think he's okay, but yeah, he's whatever. I mean, yeah, he's A tier. He's not S tier, that's for sure. He's not S or even S plus tier. Like, he's not broken at all. He's A tier at best. I would even put him sometimes at B tier. I played against many different Twitches now, and I'm pretty sure I've won against Twitch every single time, because all of these S plus tier champions are still insanely strong. Champions like Lucian are still very, very good. You have a lot of carry potential. You have a lot of early game damage. You can be paired with a lot of different supports, engaged, Lulu supports, anything like that, because attack speed still works really, really great for him. Kraken Slayer is really, really strong rune for Lucian as well, and he's still, pretty strong in general. Tristana, one of the best late game carries in the game right now. Your first ability that gives you extra range, your passive that gives you extra range per level. At a stage of the game, your first ability has as much range as a Twitch. So Twitch's ultimate that has like a 40-second cooldown for him to get increased range, which he doesn't really do that much damage anyway. Tristana gets that passively anyway. Tristana gets passive attack speed and also gets passive range as well. And then she gains extra attack speed with her first ability. She has the same burst potential with her third ability. She can use her ultimate as like a kiting tool or a way to just burst an enemy down. And then you have your jump that resets all the time. So you can jump in, you can jump out of fights. You're just insanely strong. Caitlyn, her early game is really, really good. She's best paired with like an enchanter support, same with Kai'Sa and Vayne. Yeah, her range is really her strength. Her laner phase is really her strength. She can bully out a lot of champions in the early game. She does the same burst damage. The only thing with Caitlyn is that she's not really a great late game carry in a way. Like, there's a lot of outplay potential with champions like Tristana, Kai'Sa, and Vayne in terms of the late game. But Caitlyn in the early game, you can get a strong enough advantage where you can use that advantage as your late game carry in a way. Kai'Sa, this champion, is absolutely insane. You get a really early power spike at 2 BF swords. You don't even need a first item to get your first power spike. You get 2 BF swords. You get your first ability upgraded. Boom, you're already at a strong power spike in the game. And then she has invincibility with her third ability. She has her ultimate that gives her a shield. She has a lot of trading in the laner phase. She has a lot of carry potential. She's like an assassin, so she can dive into the backline as well. She has pretty much everything that you want in an AD carry. Vayne as well, when paired with the likes of a Lulu or a Janna or anyone like that, this champion is absolutely disgusting. Like, Vayne Lulu is one of the strongest combos in the game right now. Vayne in general is very, very strong, just because how the meta is right now, because the meta is very bruiser and tank heavy. So Vayne does a lot of true damage, and Vayne does just a lot of damage in general. She has invisibility as well. She can tumble. She can condemn against the wall. She has crowd control. She has pretty much everything. Samira, the only reason why she's not in S plus tier is because she is quite difficult to play. She relies a lot on her combos and using your abilities at the right place at the right time. And if she dashes in and uses her ultimate and then it gets cancelled, then she can be pretty much isolated and take a lot of damage, and she is very, very scary to play at times. So you have to be very, very careful when playing Samira, but she still does a lot of damage. Once you get 2 items, Bloodthirster, Infinity Edge, and then you can build a bit more tanky afterwards, so you can sustain a lot more during team fights, and you can take a lot more damage, then she can be a great carry in the draw lane. Draven, one of the best early games in the game right now, has one of the highest base ADs at level 1, and you can use that to your advantage with how strong your first ability is and how much extra AD you get for picking up your axes. Again, though, Draven is a pretty difficult champion to play, because you have to make sure you pick up your axes, and you have to make sure you just stack as much of your passive as possible. And then once you fully stack your passive, then you'll be able to use Draven to your advantage, catch your axes, and do really, really well. Corki is decent. I think the only worry thing about Corki is that he doesn't really get a power spike until about like 2 or 3 items, and most of the time you want to build Manamune, which is kind of the same with like Ezreal. It's like most of these carries are getting one item power spikes, and your one item power spike is like a man immune, for example. So it's not really a power spike straight away, but if the champions scale, like if Corki scales, if Ezreal scales into mid and late game, then they can be insanely strong. Like Corki's a really strong champion, Ezreal's a really strong champion. Like I said, the only problem is both these champions go man immune into Trinity Force, so you're not getting a power spike at your first item, you're more getting a power spike when your first item upgrades into Muramana, and then you get items like Trinity Force, which can be very, very strong. Zaya is still really, really good. Still very, very strong champion to play. Again, kind of difficult because you need to understand how her feather mechanic works with trying to stack your feathers, trying to use your abilities. But she has great kiting. She has great front to back because of her attack speed, and also her first ability and her third ability is also very, very strong. Varus is pretty good. You can play him AP or AD, or even a mix. I've seen a mix of AD and AP Varus builds. You can play AD lethality or AP on hit. Both of these builds are very, very good. AD is more for long range poke damage. AP is more for on hit against a lot of tanks. If you're against a lot of tanks, if you don't have a lot of AP damage on your team, you can go AP damage, go for Nash's Tooth, Death Cap, Void Staff, items like that, Rift Maker, and then do a lot of on hit damage because you stack your passive on your second ability. For your second ability, or you stack your passive in general. You can just use your ultimate to stack your passive, and then one use of one of your abilities, like your first ability, does a ton of damage. Zeri's still pretty good. Her laning phase is pretty weak. Obviously, she has been nerfed quite a lot. She's not S+ tier potential anymore. But Zeri's still in a pretty decent spot where she has a lot of mobility with her third ability. She can still carry work very well if she gets paired with someone like a Lulu, because obviously shields give her movement speed. Again, she's very front to back. She's very, I need to get a kill first, and I need to try and, you know, use my ultimate and get in range of my ultimate, which is a big thing. Jhin with Electrocute is also still pretty good, with items like Ghost Blade, Lord Dominic's Regards, which is, by the way, still not fixed. The bug's still there with Lord Dominic's Regards. If you know what the bug is, basically, Jhin doesn't gain extra AD with Lord Dominic's Regards at the moment, so the bug is still there, unfortunately. Twitch I already spoke about. Jinx, I actually moved down into A tier. The reason being is that I think Jinx really badly needs an enchanter. I don't think Jinx works well with any other supports rather than enchanters. Jinx Lulu, for example, is very, very good. But her laning phase is not really that great. She kind of needs a few items really to get online, and she needs a kill during a team fight. If she gets a kill during a team fight, then she can be very, very strong. But again, because the champion doesn't have any mobility or any ways to really kite around or really do too much, then she can be very, very difficult to play at times. Ashe is still pretty decent. Her ultimate is still really, really strong. You can use this across the whole map if you want to. She has great single target damage. She does a lot of damage in general. She has a lot of crowd control. She's just more of a supportive carry in the bot lane. She's not really a carry where she does a lot of damage. She's more of a supportive carry. AP champions, I think I'm going to skip. I mean, I was actually thinking of removing AP champions in general in bot lane, because I don't think anyone really plays AP champions in bot lane. And this is more of a solo queue tier list, so I'll kind of skip them. But you can look at the AP champions if you want to. Like, they're all decent enough. Miss Fortune's okay. Ultimate's still pretty good. Again, the problem is that Miss Fortune doesn't really have any mobility. Akshan dual lane, you don't really have a lot of 1v1 potential like you do in the mid lane, because mid lane Akshan is kind of where it's at really, because you get a lot of carry potential. Again, more AP champions. And then Senna, this is farming Senna. When you're last hitting minions, you do not want to go for this. Yeah, farming Senna, not too great. And last but by no means least, we have support. Sitting up in the S+ tier is the same champions as usual. We have Karma and Nami. Champions like Lulu and Yumi can definitely go up there as well. I think Karma and Nami has a lot more outplay potential and has a lot more carry potential, especially Karma. Karma is very, very strong. All you really need is one item, which is Luden's Echo, and then she becomes insanely strong. Once Karma gets one item, gets Luna's Echo, uses her abilities to just poke. Again, as I mentioned, in mid lane, she has shielding, she has crowd control, she has everything she wants as a support, but she doesn't actually build support items. You go Ludens, you go Leandries, you go Deathcap, you go Void Staff. She does a lot of damage, but she's also very good at peening at the same time, because she has shielding, as I mentioned, she has movement speed, she has crowd control in her second ability and her ultimate. She's just all around a great support. Nami a little bit more difficult to play. But again, a champion has a lot of playmaking potential, can be used as an engage tool, can also be used as a disengage tool. I think both of these ways that you can play Nami is very, very good and can be very, very interesting to play. S tier, there are a few champions here. Interesting thing about S tier is I did add Gragas into the support pool. I think Gragas support is really, really good. If you've seen my video on Gragas, you'll see how strong Gragas support is at the moment as a full tank. Yes, you're not going to do as much damage as like a mid lane or jungle Gragas. Yes, you're not going to do a lot of damage, but it's the outplay potential, which is where Gragas shines. Your ultimate is one of the best ultimates in the game. If you can use your ultimate to split up an entire team, you isolate one target, you body slam them, you proc your aftershock, your damage is not really where it lies with Gragas. You know, it's kind of the same with champions like Alistar, Nautilus. Sorry, like I see Threshes go for Iceborne Gauntlet. I see Alistars go for like Sunfire Aegis. Same with Nautilus. That's not the purpose of these champions. Like the purpose of tank supports is not to deal damage. You're not building a tank support to deal damage. You're building a tank support to tank. Like the word tank is in the name. Like, you know, you're there for crowd control. You're there to make plays. You're there to make aggressive plays. You're there to be at the front line during team fights. You're there to engage at the front line as well. Like you're the one that's always going to be engaging at first. You're the one that makes the decisions, whether it's a hook by Thresh, whether it's the combos from Alistar, whether it's the ultimates by Nautilus, the body slams from Gragas, the Leona ultimates, the Galio flash taunts. Like with all these tank supports, they're all about making plays. So you need Aftershock, you need Warmogs to be able to tank a lot more damage, and you need items like Force of Nature and Twin Guard so you can tank enough damage to make these plays and tank a lot more damage than the rest of your team can follow up. So yeah, that's kind of where I stand on tank supports in general. But they're all like S tier. They're all pretty decent. You know, Gragas is really, really good. Nautilus has great single target. Crowd control is probably one of the best tank supports right now. Alistar's combo is still very, very good and can carry a team fight. Galio is still pretty good with his ultimate and also his taunt. Leona, I would say is probably the weakest out of all of these. But she's still sure is very strong. As for the other ones, you know, Enchanters, Lulu and Yumi, again, are still very, very strong right now. But the only thing is that they don't have a lot of carry potential compared to the other AD carries. So, I mean, other support, sorry. So that's really where I lie with that. Pyke is pretty good in the support role still. Your roaming is really good. You have your ultimate that you can use to roam around the map and do very, very well. And then Senna and Ashe are more like carry supports in the bot lane, but they are still very, very strong, these carry supports. Rakan, I've moved down into A tier. Rakan got absolutely gutted in the previous patch. I don't know what they done to Rakan, but they nerfed him. Well, I say nerfed him to the ground. I haven't actually played with a Rakan yet, or I haven't actually played Rakan yet. I played against Rakan, and he just doesn't really have that one-shot potential anymore that he used to have before, but he still has a lot of crowd control available to him, and he does still do quite a lot of damage. Maybe you go for like full tank Rakan now, and you just kind of work the same as the other ones, where you're like just a tank support, and you don't rely on damage, but yeah, I think it's very interesting. Brom is like one of the weaker of the tank supports, doesn't have a lot of playmaker potential, is more there for kiting and more there for defending your AD carry. Soraka's still pretty decent, has a lot of healing. Just need to build one item though to make Soraka not as strong, but she's still very, very good. Lux with her shields are still very, very good. Same with like Sona and Seraphine. All these Enchanter supports with A tier are still pretty good. Like they can still work, but they're just not as good as the Enchanters above. Obviously, I moved Seraphine down as well because I just think the other Enchanters are better. You know, I think it's very difficult to put Seraphine at the same tier as like a Lulu and a Yumi, for example. So that's why I moved her down. But she is still very, very good though. Same with Sona, same with Lux, all of these. B tier is kind of unique picks. You know, Shen, Nasus, Set. I think these are just all very, very unique picks. And then Morgana and Blitzcrank down there in C tier. That is pretty much everything. We are pretty much about to round it out at an hour on the dot in this video. I want to go a little more in depth in this video because I wanted to give you all my insight, and I haven't really done one of these long tier list videos in a long time. So let me know what you think as always down in the comments. Make sure you enter the giveaway as well. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment down below to be entered into the giveaway. Again, if you do not know what this website is Wild Rift Fire. It is a website where I do all the builds on. It is by the amazing people over at Mobifire. They basically hired me to do all these sort of builds and everything. I say it's my website. I didn't actually design the website myself, but all the builds and everything are all just mine. They're no one else's. So if you're looking for like the Twitch guide, for example, you can do the Twitch guide, which is currently being worked on at the moment, where the videos will be added and all of this breakdown will be added. But we've got a full guide here already for Twitch, ready for you all to look at. If you're looking for like an Ezreal guide, you've got an Ezreal guide here, which I'm adding my A to Z videos on. Again, same with combos, build breakdowns, everything like that. So if you need a place to stop, if you want any build for any champion, make sure you check out Wildfire Fire. Link is down in the description. But thank you all for tuning into this video. It was a lot of fun to break down this video. Again, I still think I've got some more changes to make, which I'll probably do after this video. But I appreciate you all. Thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you all in the next Wild video. Peace.